May 1918, the Western Front of World War I. Privates Henry Johnson and Needham Roberts stood guard in the Argonne Forest in the stillness of a moonlit night. Members of the Harlem Hellfighters regiment of the U.S. Army, the two soldiers were about to face a trial by fire. The serenity of the night was shattered when a German raiding party, over 20 men strong, emerged from the shadows. The crack of gunfire and the thunder of grenades disrupted the silence, transforming the tranquil forest into a chaotic battleground. Johnson, wounded by enemy rounds and shrapnel, fought with ferocity, using his rifle and bolo knife to turn the tide. Roberts, despite his wounds, remained at his side, handing grenades to Johnson until two Prussian soldiers seized him, dragging him off the trench in an attempt to capture him. Determined to save his comrade, Johnson pursued them, hurling grenades and firing his rifle until he exhausted his ammunition. Undeterred, he drew his bolo knife once more and charged into the darkness, resolute to rescue Roberts in the inky blackness of the forest. The story of the first American unit to be awarded the French Croix de Guerre, a distinguished military honor for exceptional bravery during World War I, begins with the 15th New York Colored Infantry Regiment of the National Guard. This unit originated in New York's Harlem district, where community members actively campaigned for a local military unit. Despite facing repeated political obstacles, the African American community remained steadfast in their determination to serve. On June 2, 1913, the New York State Legislature passed a bill authorizing the creation of an African American National Guard regiment. Governor William Salzer signed it into law, marking a significant victory. However, the 15th New York existed only on paper until June 1916. At that point, Governor Charles Whitman took decisive action. He approached William Hayward, his former campaign manager, as the commanding officer of the unit. With this appointment, the 15th New York began to take shape, moving from an idea to an active regiment ready to serve. Hayward was already a man with knowledge in the field, having served previously as a colonel in the Nebraska National Guard. Hayward reflected on his commitment to the 15th's future. Quote, "As a strict organizer, I knew that incorporating African American soldiers into the officers' corps was not just a necessity, but a duty." Despite receiving support from the New York Age, the leading African American newspaper at the time, the 15th New York Regiment struggled to meet its recruitment goals. The regiment aimed to enlist several thousand men, but by late summer 1916, recruitment numbers fell significantly short of that target. Nevertheless, life moved forward. Commander Hayward and his men journeyed to South Carolina for basic training. They drilled in the heat, marching through dusty fields and learning the skills necessary for combat. During this period, the government passed the Selective Service Act of 1917. This act called for all men aged 20 to 30 to join the military, boosting the regiment's numbers as they prepared for the looming conflict against the Prussian Empire. Before leaving for Europe to confront the Teutons and Austrians, the 15th was banned from joining the National Guard's farewell parade in New York, the Rainbow Division. Following the segregationist policies of the era, their request was denied, and the unit was sent to Europe without participating in the parade. Upon arriving in France in December 1917, the 15th was recommissioned as the Army's 369th Infantry. The troops were eager to see combat, fighting the enemy at the trenches, but they were segregated and kept away from other U.S. Army and Marine units. While the hellish trench warfare consumed men by the thousands, the Allied command insisted that American troops should be integrated into British and French units to bolster their effectiveness due to their pressing need for reinforcements. Nevertheless, General John J. Pershing, commander of the American Expeditionary Force, dismissed this idea, arguing that American troops should fight alone to keep their integrity and independence. However, the general did make some concessions, such as giving away the 369th to the French 16th Division, as many Americans refused to fight alongside them. On his directive to the French, General Pershing noted that these soldiers were inferior, lacking the proper qualities of professional soldiers. To further humiliate his African American troops, he wrote that French civilians should not mingle with them to avoid spoiling them. As for Commander Hayward, leader of the 369th, he wrote to a friend, quote, "Our great American general simply put the black orphan in a basket, set it on the doorstep of the French, pulled the bell, and went away." After 3 weeks of training, the men were combat ready. They kept their American uniforms, but were given French rifles, belts, boots, and the iconic Adrian helmet employed by the French army. Unlike the American army, the 369th was not segregated from the French, where the men socialized with white French and colonial troops from Africa and Asia, facing little discrimination. Now properly fed, equipped, and trained, they were finally dispatched to the front lines in early April 1918, near the Champagne region of France, to fight the Huns entrenched in the Argonne Forest. During this period, they engaged in trench warfare, patrols, and skirmishes. Muddy trenches lined with barbed wire became their battlefield as they crawled through the muck, dodging enemy fire and launching rage under the cover of darkness. These experiences steeled them for larger-scale battles, such as Bolo would. Their involvement in continuous combat operations starting in April 1918 marked the beginning of their distinguished service on the Western Front. They spent 191 days in combat, more than any other American unit of the war. Soon, the men earned a name for themselves fighting the Prussian army. The Empire was on its knees, but General Erich Ludendorff still launched the last offensive of the war to push back the French and British forces. The Allied lines were battered, but not broken, and the ferocity and determination of the soldiers of the 369th, who refused to leave an inch of ground, left a lasting impression on their adversaries, with the Germans nicknaming them Hellfighters. Thus, the Harlem Hellfighters were born, and tales of uncommon bravery became the norm for the men while they engaged the enemy near the Argonne Forest. In May 1918, Privates Henry Johnson and Needham Roberts were posted as night sentries at a camp near enemy lines. The night was quiet, but the men remained vigilant. The distant echoes of battle murmured miles away, but their zone was eerily calm, allowing them brief, fleeting thoughts of home. Private Johnson, a 25-year-old railroad baggage porter from Albany, New York, strained his ears and heard leaves cracking in the darkness. His eyes pierced through the night, catching shadowy shapes moving stealthily. He quickly turned to Private Roberts, gesturing toward the noises. The men then heard the distinct sound of barbed wire being cut. Adrenaline surged through their veins as Johnson fired an illumination flare, casting an eerie glow and revealing the enemy. Almost immediately, Prussian grenades were hurled at them, exploding and sending shrapnel into Johnson's left side. Despite his own head injury, Roberts lobbed grenades at the approaching enemy, desperately trying to halt their advance. Over 20 Prussians were attacking, but neither man backed down. They fired their French rifles, the muzzle flashes briefly lighting up their determined faces. The Germans, undeterred by the initial resistance, closed in. Johnson shot a soldier in the chest at point-blank range, then swung his rifle like a club, striking another. As the enemy dragged Roberts away, Johnson, driven by sheer will, leapt out of the trench with his bolo knife. He slashed through the darkness, taking the life of an enemy combatant, only to be shot in the shoulder and leg by another. Despite his wounds, Johnson lunged at his assailant, ending his life and freeing Roberts. The surviving Prussians, now panicked, retreated as Johnson hurled grenades after them, the explosions lighting their frantic escape. The next day, an army captain concluded that Johnson had taken the lives of at least 4 of the 24 German soldiers who attacked the position and tried to capture his comrade. Following this encounter, and once the sector had been cleared, Johnson and Roberts were awarded the French Croix de Guerre, becoming the first Americans, black or white, to receive such distinction. The U.S. military would not recognize the merit of these brave Americans until 1996, when Roberts and Johnson were posthumously awarded the Purple Heart. Years later, in 2002, Johnson was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for rescuing Roberts, followed by the Congressional Medal of Honor in 2015. Following the attacks in the Argonne Forest, the Harlem Hellfighters were dispatched to Seychelles in September 1918. It was here that another African-American soldier, Corporal Lawrence McVeigh, showcased his valor. The air was thick with the roar of aircraft as enemy and friendly planes clashed above. On the ground, McVeigh's squad was pinned down by a relentless machine gun nest. The enemy pillbox, an imposing structure of concrete and steel, had to be neutralized for his entire unit to advance, no matter the cost. When the situation became dire, Corporal McVeigh tapped into his inner warrior. With a fierce resolve, he led his men in a charge through the hellish landscape, dodging bullets and leaping over obstacles. The close-quarters combat was brutal, but McVeigh and his squad fought with a tenacity that left the enemy position in ruins. Despite his success, McVeigh did not emerge unscathed. He was seriously wounded in the fierce engagement, but was also awarded the Croix de Guerre for his unmatched bravery. By the time the war ended, the Harlem Hellfighters had spent a grueling 191 days in combat, proving themselves as both patriots and formidable warriors. Their bravery left a lasting impression on the French, who were so impressed that every man in the unit was awarded the Croix de Guerre for bravery, making them the first U.S. regiment to receive this distinguished honor. Commander Hayward would honor his African-American troops at the end of the conflict by stating, quote, "My men never retire. They go forward or die." Out of 3,000, some 1,300 Hellfighters were casualties of war. Besides their impressive service record, the Harlem Hellfighters also made headlines in Europe due to their regimental band, led by Lieutenant James Reese Europe. As band leader, he pioneered the introduction of African-American jazz in Europe, spearheading this vibrant new genre internationally. Though not renowned for his combat prowess, Europe played a crucial role in elevating the status of the Harlem Hellfighters through music. His performances captivated audiences, helping to establish a lasting legacy for the regiment in both Europe and the United States. Despite their collective achievements, including 11 French citations and more than 170 Croix de Guerre awards, the heroes returned to the States to face harsh prejudice and racism. Though the victory parade down Fifth Avenue in New York honored their service, their post-war lives were marked by economic and social hardships. The African-American veterans of the Harlem Hellfighters endured continued racism and segregation, even during subsequent conflicts such as World War II, the Korean War, and to some extent the Vietnam War. Nonetheless, the tenacity, bravery, and self-sacrifice of the Harlem Hellfighters are universally recognized today. They proved to the world and their country that they fought with patriotism to achieve equality and overcome racial prejudice.